On my way in, I was talking to a safety director from a Colorado paving company, and he said he was hiring a lawyer yesterday. And he said, okay, so what are your rates? And he said, well, $15,000 up front and then $2,941 a month for 3 years. And he said, that sounds like a car payment to me. And he said, it is. It's my new Ferrari. And so, I think that's one of the big questions for you today as you leave here is, do you want to take all that hard-earned money that your company really puts a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into making and use it to buy a lawyer a Ferrari or the plaintiff's lawyer a Lamborghini? Because if the defense lawyer is getting a Ferrari, I guarantee you the plaintiff's lawyer is getting a Lamborghini. Or do you want to put that money toward saving lives up front, saving your company the heartache, the hassle, the time drain, and the money of these catastrophic injuries? I mean, that's really the practical issue that you face today. And I know on your agenda you have a lot of speakers who have really good practical ideas for how you can accomplish that goal. David with his technological solutions I'm extremely excited about. But one of the reasons I was so grateful to be invited today is I started doing this 26 years ago. When I came out of law school, there were different kinds of law I could do. And let's face it, personal injury law isn't exactly the kind of law your mother's going to be proudest of. But I decided to go into that because, to me, I was either going to be a priest or a politician or a cop like my dad. But to me, in personal injury law, there's a chance to save lives, just as you have a chance to save lives in what you do. And there's a chance to make a darn good living, but there's a chance to work with real people, helping them get some fairness and helping them cope with some really awful situations. So I started it 26 years ago. In the course of those 26 years, I've probably sued about everybody in this room. And I've probably handled about every kind of terrible, distracted driving catastrophe that can befall a person or a company, large or small. And I get it. I'm a small business owner. Law firms are small businesses too. We address the same types of issues that all other small businesses address. So I get that small businesses, large businesses are the backbone of our society. Without those businesses thriving and operating well, we don't eat. We don't have a place to live. I get that. So my goal isn't to tear down businesses. My goal is to just have everybody do it a little bit better. And if that puts me out of business, that's fine. There are other things I can find to do for a living. But over the course of 26 years, man, from the young mother who's quadriplegic because of a distracted driver up in the Yukon to the beautiful young boy, only child of a single mom who dies in Boulder because of a second of distracted driving. All over this country, I've handled every kind of case you can imagine. And so, what I'd like to do in my few minutes with you today is, and I was fascinated by the questions you were throwing at Tim, as the father of 2 young kids, as a trial lawyer, as a talk show host, I never ever get to finish a sentence or a thought. So, interrupt me anytime you want. I'd much rather have a back and forth, a free flow. If you think I'm full of it on a point that I make, just say so and we'll think it through. But just a couple of basic points I want to make. One is that all of these catastrophes happen in a matter of seconds. We all know the math at just 60 miles an hour, and most people are driving around that parking lot faster than that. You're going about 30 yards, about a third of a football field in a single second. So we all know that all it takes, 1 or 2 seconds, less than that, of distracted driving, and all of a sudden a life is lost or somebody's in a wheelchair, your company's at risk. Even if you're insured heavily, you're going to have a major time drain. And because of the jobs you hold, you should not underestimate the psychological impact on your employee, who's not Charlie Manson. Your employee's a good person who a second or two of bad judgment now has taken a life, and they have to live with that. So all of that just happens so very quickly. And that's why if there's one message I want to carry to you today, as a guy who spends most of his waking hours trying to find ways to beat you in court, and not just to beat you, because that's easy in the kind of case I'm talking about. I'm talking about turning that case into 5 or 10 times more compensation for my clients than you would normally get from that kind of injury. And I have no qualms about doing that. Because in these kind of cases where everybody can see it coming, and if they did the right thing, it wasn't going to happen, my view is my client in that wheelchair, they should get every benefit of the doubt. And the area that drives me out of my mind, and more importantly, because I don't matter, what matters is what that jury is going to say, is cell phones. Cell phones right now have become the new drunk driving. I mean, drunk driving cases my dead dog could do, you know, and every jury's just going to be looking for a big enough club to jump out of the jury box and beat people with in drunk driving cases. But cell phone cases are the new drunk driving cases. And they're even more threatening to corporations because every juror knows, you know, that no corporation out there is going to go out and encourage their people to pick up a six-pack, you know, on their way to their next job or stop. Nobody's going to do that. But corporations do knowingly let their people use cell phones. And I can tell you, when a catastrophic case comes into my office, and that's pretty much all we do, when a catastrophic case comes in, I can tell you before they even tell me, just from the fact pattern, I can tell you whether that was a cell phone, whether that was texting, you know, because most of the big catastrophes now come from cell phones or texting. And I've got a few practical suggestions for you, but as people talk about, and very appropriately, what are the technical legal standards for this liability or that liability, my answer is usually it's whatever a judge and jury decides those legal standards are going to be. And in this day and age, when it comes to all of us knowing from practical experience, I used the cell phone 10 times on the way over to talk to you this morning. Each and every time I did it, it was irresponsible. And I knew it. And I knew it as I was doing it. But you know what? If, God forbid, I got distracted and hit somebody, well, I'm going to have to live with that, maybe be judged on it eventually. But from a legal liability standpoint, I'm not a fraction as vulnerable as you are. Because I'm an individual just like every other individual out there who makes a mistake of using a cell phone when he drives. But you guys are companies. You guys are companies that sit down and develop policies. So if one of your people gets distracted by a cell phone and kills somebody or maims somebody, guess what? You made that policy. You had a chance up front to cut that off, and you decided not to. That is a whole different dynamic. Plus, when it comes to any of us as individuals who get sued, you know, juries just have a completely different attitude toward us as individuals, as defendants, than they do as us as business owners or as corporations. Completely different attitude. Part of it's the deep pocket thing. Part of it's just the overall responsibility. So my advice to you is just develop a zero tolerance policy. I mean, some of the people in this room are as old as I am, and we all remember we were all able to do business fine without having to talk on the cell phone. You know, we did it for years and years and years. And so I'm just telling you, from a plaintiff lawyer standpoint, who's handled a lot of these cases all over the country, the only way to really protect yourself is to just say no. If you really have to take or make a call, then you pull over and you take or make that call. But understand, when it comes to driving juries crazy, it's not just about somebody using the cell phone. I handled a horrible case up in Greeley. This beautiful young girl, she's a flagger on a construction site and a driver for, I'm sure, the safety directors in this room, big Colorado company. He wasn't even talking on the phone. He was just looking for his phone. And he sends her up like the space shuttle. She went 30 feet into the air when he hit her. And she will never recover from those injuries. And that company's big enough to take the financial hit, but it was a pretty big seven-figure financial hit. And it's just because he was looking for the cell phone. Most of the bad cell phone cases I handle around the country are people looking for the phone, people looking to see if a message has come in, people dialing the phone. It's usually not people talking on the phone. So when people say, well, you know, our company requires hands-free, I got to tell you, that's not impressing juries very much. Because so what? I mean, the point is you still have to go through all of those other distractions to use the cell phone. It still presents, in my humble opinion, about 98, 99% of the same element of risk. The other thing is texting. Yes, sir?
What if you have a policy that tells your folks that you're not allowed to use it at all, hands-free or otherwise, and they choose to do it and they're on your time?
What a tremendous question. What if you have that policy and then they decide to violate your policy? You're probably okay if you've done what? Exactly. Enforced it. I just got out of a case where a great company, one of the nicest, best run companies I've ever seen, a Colorado company, offices in a couple other states, They had all the right policies about drinking and driving. You can't stop in a company vehicle on your way home from work and have some beers and then get back in the company vehicle. Great policies on paper, but they didn't enforce them. You know, they were afraid of the union. And they liked their guys. They had great employees, experienced employees. They kind of trusted them. Well, this time it didn't work out so well. And there was a horrible, horrible wreck in the company truck, and the guy was wildly drunk. So in the course of the depositions, I finally drilled down with this one supervisor to, yeah, you know, they told me after the wreck, Charlie, we're going to have to start enforcing that one. And I guarantee you that that's even worse than having no policy. Because once you have the policy, you've admitted you got the risk, you got the problem, and then if you don't enforce it, it's kind of like, hey, who cares? So to me, it's all about enforcement. And I know that David's going to talk to you about some technological ways to enforce that I think are very, very exciting, but you got to enforce. Because if you don't, here's the message, guys, and here's what I argue to juries, and it doesn't take but 30 seconds into my closing argument before I see one or two heads start to nod up and down, and I know that I've got them, because it's an undeniable argument. If you don't have the right kind of policy up front, and if you don't enforce it, then what you have just said is that there is an acceptable casualty rate. And there should not be an acceptable casualty rate when it comes to these kind of wrecks. Now, we all know you're not expected to go out and hire Danica Patrick to drive every one of your vehicles. But at the same time, if you don't have that, in my opinion, that zero tolerance policy on cell phones, then you're essentially saying there is an acceptable casualty rate, and people don't like that. I have one other area I want to get into. Any questions on that in the meantime? Here's the thing, the other point I make to juries that they agree with every time, and that is one of the reasons that zero tolerance policy is so important is when you're out hiring people, I mean, the reality is you are hiring people to operate cruise missiles in a crowded metro area. That's the reality of this. I mean, and they don't have any computer to help them do it. Every one of these vehicles, even the smaller vehicles for the smaller companies, you're still talking about 3,000 or 4,000 pounds, often at 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, that you are hiring these people to take out onto the roadways. As you get into the bigger vehicles, obviously, the risk goes up. But when you look at it that way, and you look at the potential danger and destruction that awaits even a second or two of distracted driving out there, jurors are not very forgiving when it comes to a failure to just rigorously think through and enforce these policies. And I understand, listen, that really great young father who's working 2 or 3 jobs now, he has a new baby at home, you know, so he has to have 18 cups of coffee a day to make it through the day. I understand that men and women like that are the best that we have. But the truth is, all of those human factors that affect us and that degrade our ability to safely operate that cruise missile are things that should be foreseeable and predictable to you as a company, and that you guys have to be able to show you've anticipated, you're doing your best to deal with, because if you don't, at the end of the day, a jury's going to go ballistic on you. Not in every case. We all know juries just happen to be whatever 6 we get in the box that day, and it's really not even the 6. It's whatever leader you get on the jury, or maybe sometimes you have 2 leaders. But generally speaking, you know, the arc of where we're going, I heard Tim refer to kind of the developing standard of care. The arc of where we're going is when it comes to cell phones, when it comes to texting, they're going to hammer you. And I know you'd all much rather save those lives up front, save the heartache, save the money. And if you think your company's too big in the end to really be rocked by this, you may be right. I mean, you know, if you've got 50 or 100 million in insurance. But I'm doing one in Kansas City right now, a young hospital executive who half a second of distracted driving by a guy delivering some food over to Perkins. And my guy now sits in a nursing home about 6 blocks from here and will for the rest of his life. We go to trial on that case in Kansas City in about 6 months. And the medical bills and lost earnings alone right now are over $20 million. And I've got a shot at punitives, pretty good shot at punitives. So if we win that case, can that company handle 40 or 50 million? Maybe, but mine sure couldn't. I don't think most companies in this room could handle that. So the point is, you know, you're just a second or 2 away from a catastrophic loss that could sink your company. So thank you for having me.